this is part 2 of the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, the Riley Crabb years. We're going to jump back into radionics where we left off in the first episode and get into a whole host of other problems, etc. Enjoy. There are healing discs and quote-unquote Atlantean diagnostic mirrors, which Crabb's BSRF writings detailed sometime in the 60s, 70s era. These were small metallic or crystal discs that could scan or repair etheric body imbalances, quote-unquote. So if your chi's all fucked up, these unfuck your chi. They claim to come from a blend of Etherian, Atlantean, and Lemurian technology. The user would place a crystal-laced disc over an affected area or chakra somewhere on their body while meditating. Some were said to be able to shift color or temperature as a form of feedback or diagnostic indication tool for areas of spiritual disease or malady. Crabb's interpretation was that these were seen as sacred tools for balancing one's karma and healing trauma from prior lifetimes stored in the etheric body, healing epigenetic trauma, so to speak. There is the Life Field Analyzer, channeled by Mark Probert and later developed into real-world radionic schematics, which could analyze the quote-unquote life fields, or the aura, or subtle energy bodies of a human subject. Once again, bioenergetics. We'll get into the hard science down the road, I promise. But they often used a pendulum over a dial, similar to the De La Warr radionic machines. Crystals and rotating frequency plates were said to tune in the device to an individual's etheric signature and could purportedly detect attachments, i.e. discarnate entities, non-human intelligences that are of a parasitic nature, often astral or etheric, that would attach themselves to people's spiritual or biological energy signatures, karmic wounds, or even alien interference. The BSRF and Etherian messages frequently stated that patents and discoveries were being suppressed by the military-industrial complex, especially anything related to zero-point energy or psychic healing, that governments had reverse-engineered partial technologies from ether ships but failed to understand the spiritual prerequisites or safe uses for such energies or machinery, devices, inventions, etc., and that religious authorities rejected such tech because it would collapse dogmatic control structures, as mentioned before. Now, you've heard the name Riley Crabb quite a few times, and it's time we got into Mr. Crabb and the BSRF's post-1950s evolution into the next generation. After Lane's death in 1961 that one Riley Hansard Crabb took over as director. He's a former Navy man and metaphysical lecturer who significantly expanded the BSRF's focus into deeper conspiracy territory, and I thank him for it. Riley Hansard Crabb, born 1913, died 1994. Developed an early interest in the esoteric after discovering the Theosophical Society Library in Minneapolis around circa 1934. He and his first wife, Judy, or Judith Misano Miyama Crabb, eventually moved to Hawaii, where he served as president of the Honolulu Lodge of the Theosophical Society for 3 years. There he also studied the indigenous kahuna practices, more or less pagan magic, indigenous to the Hawaiian Islands. In 1957, Crabb moved to California and took a role as a visual information specialist at the U.S. Navy's Pacific Missile Range in Point Mugu, California. Point Mugu. Meet Lane's health issues prompted a leadership transition, so in 1959, Lane formally asked Crabb to take over the BSRF, or as it was known at the time, Borderland Sciences Research Associates. Crabb and Judy relocated to Eureka, California, and made the BSRF their full-time focus. Lane officially resigned on June 1st, 1959. It's from 1959 through 1985 that Crabb directed the BSRF and edited its flagship publication, The Round Robin. later called the Journal of Borderland Research. And if you can find any of these journals of Borderland Research, I highly recommend checking them out. They are just a peculiar treasure trove of strange, wonderful ideas. Under his guidance, the BSRF deepened its investigations to UFO phenomena, psychic topics, radionics, and metaphysical healing. Crabb was noted for integrating these fields with their esoteric philosophy. The foundation transitioned from an informal association to an incorporated nonprofit in 1951. Crabb later clarified controversies surrounding the purchase of the group from Lane. He self-financed the early years while nurturing the journal and its global readership, and is often credited with expanding their international reach. Crabb held firm views on UFO contactees like John Keel and Jacques Vallée, famously criticizing them as metaphysical illiterates. Not Keel and Vallée. They were of the same mind that people like the Three Georges were quote-unquote metaphysical illiterates. He preferred deeply layered esoteric interpretations grounded often in theosophy, Eastern mysticism, and his own kahuna practices. His ambitions extended to encouraging mainstream theosophical lodges to take UFO phenomenon seriously, an effort often met with skepticism by other leaders in the theosophical movement. He remained committed to, quote, relating flying saucer data to the teachings of the mystery schools, unquote. So, after Judy's death in July 1985, Crabb relocated to New Zealand, remarried, and continued theosophical and borderland writings under his new base. The journal shifted editorial hands and eventually ceased in 1997. It's also in New Zealand where he made the acquaintance and later friendship of the aforementioned Trevor James Constable. Crabb passed away in 1994, but his long editorship, influential lectures, and published works left an indelible mark on the parascientific and UFO discourse in general. His BSRF tenure from 1959 to 1985 was most productive, combining esoteric philosophy with UFO theory and parapsychology into a single framework of just esoteric Forteana in general. Seance recordings and quote-unquote inner circle publications like The Coming of the Guardians were built around channeled communications through mediums such as Probert, work that Crabb embraced as central to the BSRF's mission. The Journal of Borderland Research was the foundational mouthpiece for clandestine and metaphysical concepts, often very singular and brand new to the world, stuff you will not find anywhere else, I can guarantee you that, and often included provocative new ideas that predated modern UFO narratives. The Swedish UFO Archives, or AFU, now preserve extensive correspondence of Crabb's from 1952 to 1993, including over 900 letters that offer very rare insights into his leadership and philosophy. It was under Crabb's leadership that the BSRF publications began incorporating hollow Earth theories, particularly ideas of Agartha and inner Earth civilizations. I often feel that the term hollow Earth is misleading to people who know little or nothing about it. I feel like the name hollow Earth instantly conjures up in people's heads that the entire planet is like a hollow chocolate Easter bunny. That's not necessarily what people are saying. Some people have said that. That would be ridiculous, though. The planet Earth were like a giant hollow chocolate Easter bunny. Be a lot more delicious, but no. It's often just dealing with underground civilizations, cave systems, etc. It's no different than the confirmed existence of various inner mountain or underground military bases, except just often on a larger scale to city size, etc. They also included radionics and psychic healing machines into their mind control and secret government technology, as well as occult warfare, which we'll get into in a second, Lemurian memories, and Atlantean technologies. Now, Crabb, as director of the BSRF from the 1950s through the 80s, often used the term, quote unquote, occult warfare to describe a hidden, ongoing struggle which blended espionage, psychic attack, technological manipulation, and spiritual infiltration. He believed this warfare was being waged by both terrestrial and non terrestrial forces, with humanity caught in the middle, often unwittingly. For a detailed breakdown, if you will, of what Crabb meant by this term, well, here's a quote directly from the man himself. Quote, a multi-dimensional battle conducted in the physical, astral, and mental planes using tools of psychic attack, radionics, thought forms, electromagnetic technologies, and sorcery, carried out by both human factions and non-human intelligences. Crabb saw this as a sort of Fourth World War, silent, esoteric, unacknowledged conflict is being fought over the control of human consciousness, suppression, or liberation of esoteric sciences, the infiltration of spiritual systems, and the dominance of Earth by alien, etheric, or archontic entities. Some of the key elements of his concept of occult warfare included radionics as a psychic weapon, psychotronics in the Soviet Cold War sense, if it's ever been a one-to-one comparison, that would be it. Crabb believed that radionics and subtle energy devices could tune into and manipulate the etheric blueprint of living things that were used in both healing and as offensive attack weaponry. Certain governments, secret societies, and even corporations could use radionics to broadcast disease, fear, or chaos into reality. Counter-radionic devices were advocated by the BSRF as a form of spiritual defense, and psionic warfare, according to Crabb, was very real, with energy workers trained to subtly attack targets over great distances using radionics, charts, witness samples such as hair, blood, bodily fluids, or symbolic talismans surreptitiously taken from a targeted victim's possession without their knowledge. Crabb described astral attacks as subtle, directed energy phenomena that could induce nightmares, fatigue, illness, misfortune, neuroses, psychoses, etc., and be carried out by discarnate or disembodied entities, black magicians, or negative ETs. But these attacks could be resisted via exercises in aura strengthening, using techniques such as psychic shielding, orgone accumulators, or the violet flame meditation. He sometimes framed major historical events such as wars, political upheavals, assassinations, etc., as the visible results of psychic or astral conflicts taking part on a larger frequency, density, dimensional scale, whichever model you prefer. Crabb and the BSRF believed that military intelligence agencies, particularly in the US, the UK, and the Soviet Union, were deeply involved in occult experimentation, and he's not wrong on that. Projects allegedly aimed at mind control, remote viewing, contacting non-human entities or intelligences, as well as weather manipulation and modification. He often tied in programs like MK-Ultra, Montauk, and Nazi occultism as examples of governments, quote-unquote, playing with fire. Crabb suspected that elite factions of the military had made pacts with non-human entities, what he sometimes called serpent powers or astral parasites, decades before David Icke, I must say, in exchange for power and or psychic technologies. He emphasized the danger of quote-unquote thought forms as semi-autonomous energy constructs born from collective belief or emotional obsession. I would go one further and say that perhaps these secretive occult forces at work in the fields of parapsychology, psychotronics, etc., who work for the intelligence agencies or black magic fascist agendas, whoever the them is, in the capital THEM them sense, perhaps these people are adept at psychological manipulation and game theory to such a advanced degree that they have people conjuring thought forms in an unwitting and unknowing manner. Tulpatronics, as I've called it before. Negative mass thought forms, egregores, Crabb argued, were being engineered and fed by occult manipulators to drive war, fear, and division. The human dollar, good example. God, as most people comprehend the idea or concept of a big, angry, invisible man with a beard who isn't a fan of the ladies, etc. Mass media, advertising, and certain religious institutions were often accused by Crabb of being co-opted into astral farming, feeding off collective fear, pain, etc. by these unseen forces. Basically, just equate it with data harvesting in the way that we know it today in groups like Google and social media, and it's essentially the same thing. They have enough information on every individual to essentially build a paper version of you should you perish. I believe they did a Black Mirror episode on it. That's probably a form of media that could encapsulate the idea far better than I could ever put it into words. These forces were also, as mentioned previously, working hand in hand with non-human entities. Now, non-human entities have their various agendas, and Crabb distinguished between different classes of entities involved in occult warfare, such as our friends, the Etherians. These are higher vibrational beings who seek to help humanity evolve spiritually and technologically, but are once again often suppressed by governments and attacked by lower forces. Then you have groups like the Darrows or Archons, which are subterranean or lower astral beings of a lower frequency or density, vibrational field and output. The subterranean lower astral beings that feed off fear, confusion, and chaos and actively seek to destabilize society. People who are quote-unquote possessed by mimetic narratives. Anyone who dresses as the Joker from the Dark Knight movie, the Heath Ledger Joker, I would say they are possessed by an idea, and they're a walking red flag. Just get away from them. There are entities known as quote-unquote technicians and quote-unquote philosophers. These are entities that were previously channeled by Probert, but are representative of entire non-human intelligent races of beings, disembodied intelligences, if you will, non-corporeal thought form entities that provide counter-knowledge and protective insight into the etheric laws of the universe. And then there are, of course, reptilian or gray-like intelligences who allegedly cooperate with rogue governments for technology, and they're often viewed as false gods or rightfully as demons in most cases. This is where they will probably be correct for religious institutions of an established nature to view such entities as demonic equivalents. Although, maybe that's wrong too. Maybe the reptilians are just trying to lay their eggs and take care of their little spawnlings, sporlings, whatever they might call them. And grays are probably robots just programmed to do whatever it is they're programmed to do. They don't know any better. There is forms of defense against occult warfare. Spiritual practices such as daily psychic cleansing rituals or invocation of protective energies like, once again, the violet flame meditation or evocation and invocation of the Archangel Michael. Meditation and breath work to strengthen the aura. There are physical tools such as radionic countermeasures tuned to protective frequencies. The use of orgone accumulators or pyramid power structures to neutralize harmful electromagnetic fields. The wearing of copper coils, crystals, or specially tuned amulets to deflect etheric or astral attacks. and the accumulation of esoteric knowledge, such as studying the chakras or Kabbalah, kahuna practices, and Atlantean science to understand the battlefield upon which these wars are being waged. The learning to distinguish between internal fears and external energetic influences, the understanding the psychic geography of one's home, city, nation, world, and inner world as well. He believed the hidden war explained many contemporary phenomena such as the suppression of free energy and healing technologies, sudden deaths or mysterious disappearances of inventors, whistleblowers, etc., psychic epidemics such as waves of depression, mass shootings, suicide clusters, things of this nature. UFO secrecy and disinformation is a symptom of this as well. The rise of totalitarian ideologies driven by astral obsessions and surely sexual neuroses as well. That's my own opinion. It's got a part to play. That's definitely for sure. A quote, once again, from Riley Crabb concerning this occult warfare in a modern context says, quote, "We are under siege, not by mere spies or bombs, but by forces of anti-life, crawling through the astral slime, using governments, media, and churches as tools. The only way out is to wake up, learn the rules of this occult battlefield, and start fighting back with light, knowledge, and psychic hygiene." That's a phrase I'm going to have to start incorporating into my regular everyday life. Psychic hygiene. Crabb was a frequent speaker at alternative science conventions and established a tight correspondence network. He attempted to revive Probert's trance work and continued distributing the BSRF's back catalog, as well as his own writings, such as The Realist View of Flying Saucers, a book I tried to locate but could not find. Crabb's book, A Realist View of Flying Saucers, is one of the most referenced and widely circulated BSRF bulletins that blends spiritualist metaphysics with fringe physics and conspiracy theory to present a multidimensional and intentionally non-mainstream explanation for UFOs. Crabb argued that flying saucers are real, but they are not primarily physical in the way most scientists or ufologists understand. Instead, flying saucers are interdimensional vehicles originating from the etheric planes on a level of existence just beyond normal human perception. He criticized both the mainstream scientific view, which denied UFOs altogether, or insisted they were misidentifications or psychological phenomena such as sleep paralysis or mass hysteria, etc., and also the nuts and bolts ufology crowd, who believed all saucers were extraterrestrial craft in the conventional sense. Crabb called his approach realist, quote unquote, not because it aligned with materialist thinking, but because it incorporated etheric physics, psychic evidence, and suppressed metaphysical traditions, which he believed gave a truer picture of reality, or at least incorporated aspects often overlooked by most individuals, institutions, etc. Crabb emphasized that, quote-unquote, etheric matter, which is a concept adapted from Theosophy and Meade Lane's earlier writings, forms the real substance of many UFOs. He claims that the flying saucer is not entirely solid in the physical sense, but vibrates at a frequency just above visible matter. This explains their ability to blink in and out of sight, pass through solid objects, accelerate or turn at seemingly impossible speeds and angles, or appear ghost-like and or luminous. And he ties this directly to the teachings of Meade Lane and channeler Mark Probert, arguing that advanced civilizations dwell in these etheric bands of reality and can phase into ours temporarily. Crabb believed that modern science once knew about the ether, but suppressed it due to its spiritual implications, and he blamed the dominance of Einsteinian relativity and materialist reductionism, a deliberate effort by powerful institutions, both secular and religious, to suppress ether theory, because it offered gateways to energy healing, free energy, and consciousness expansion. In this view, acknowledging the ether would collapse the materialist worldview, threaten fossil fuel dominance and pharmaceutical industries as well, and reopen the door to spirit science, like the works of Rudolf Steiner, Wilhelm Reich, or eugenics enthusiast Nikola Tesla. The beings behind the saucers in Crabb's realist view are pilots of multiple races, bodies, energies, entities, not all of them benevolent. As mentioned before, the Etherians, of course, are benevolent. They live in a more refined frequency band of the Earth's atmosphere, aka the etheric realm, and seek to help humanity awaken to spiritual truths and recover lost knowledge. They often appear as tall, radiant beings, similar to Nordic aliens or the quote-unquote ascended masters. I would say elves and fairies as well, pre-Disneyfication of what they look like. But elves and fairies often come in various different forms, just from culture to culture. So, hidden species, races of entities, peoples, etc. And the Etherians communicate with Earthlings via telepathy, automatic writing, or trance mediumship. Now, the hostile entities, which include the Darrows, the Greys, the Reptilians, and various astral parasites, sometimes pose as friendly beings, but are, in fact, deceptive. They work in cooperation with certain Earth governments in exchange for technology. They feed on fear and confusion and are part of the occult warfare matrix. Whoa. Yeah, occult warfare matrix. That's what they're perpetuating. Crabb warned that most abduction and mutilation cases were not the work of Etherians, but of these lower vibrational beings using stolen or distorted saucer technology, or stolen and corrupted meat suits. Possession, as we commonly think of it in the demonic sense. Crabb alleged that the U.S. government, especially after the 1940s Project Paperclip, knew about the etheric origins of saucers but chose to suppress it, and this suppression was partly influenced by occult and Masonic factions within the government that wanted to monopolize this etheric knowledge. Says that the military was obsessed with weaponizing the technology rather than understanding its spiritual implications. Crabb believed that disinformation campaigns were launched to make flying saucers seem ridiculous. He's not wrong there. That was definitely part of the program. To confuse the public by pushing only the nuts and bolts narrative, and to co-opt the UFO field into materialist Cold War frameworks, weaponizing the narrative, so to speak. Crabb emphasized that the true way to interact with Etherians was not radar or radio telescopes or SETI-type science, but mental and spiritual development. I find it odd that they're still trying to use radio to contact alien intelligences when humans barely even use the radio anymore. He pointed to trance mediumship, such as the sessions with Mark Probert, as the most accurate method for obtaining information from the Etherians. The contact required moral purity, a strong aura and inner stillness, not gadgets and bureaucracy. He believed the early contactees, such as the Three Georges and Probert, were closer to the truth than later experiencers shaped by Cold War paranoia and Hollywood sci-fi. This would be folks in the vein of Betty and Barney Hill. Whitley Strieber would be a perfect example of what he's talking about here. Crabb ultimately saw saucers as heralds of a coming shift in human evolution, and from materialism to an etheric awareness. They were testers of human consciousness meant to provoke spiritual questions. They were vehicles of ancient knowledge, the same crafts described in Hindu Vedic texts as Vimana. There were also biblical chariots, indigenous sky beings, Judaic Merkaba mysticism, etc. He believed that the UFO mystery was not primarily about alien invaders, but about consciousness transformation. quote from the realist view of flying saucers, quote, "Flying saucers are not machines in the crude mechanical sense of Earth science. They are constructs of consciousness, guided by intelligence, powered by life force, and rooted in dimensions which your physicists have denied, which your seers have known about for ages." Now, to get a better idea of Riley Crabb's quote-unquote realist view versus some of the other prominent contactees, we'll pick one from America. George Adamski is probably the most well-known of these space brother contactees from this era. And we'll pick one outside of America. How about Orfeo Angelucci? One guess where he's from. Cool name, by the way. So, the realist view in Crabb's etheric ship's point of view, we'll say, the UFOs are ether ships from a higher frequency realm. They are not solid or mechanical in the usual sense, whereas George Adamski viewed UFOs as physical spacecraft from nearby planets like Venus, Mars, Saturn, etc. Orfeo Angelucci from Italy, that's right, Italy, he saw UFOs as luminous ethereal craft appearing in dreamlike or visionary states, something often associated with mystics and saints throughout time. Now, the origins of the beings, the pilots, the occupants of these craft, Riley Crabb, in the quote-unquote realist view, saw them as multi-dimensional Etherians living in Earth's upper atmosphere and invisible to humanity's ordinary senses. Adamski saw them as humanoids, Venusians, Martians, Saturnians, who were physically visiting Earth in meat bodies. Orfeo Angelucci saw these beings as paraphysical space brothers from higher dimensions, but they can appear to originate in third-dimensional meat space. Now, the medium of contact, the methods for communication. Riley Crabb, in the realist view, viewed trance mediumship and inner psychic development, channeling through figures like Mark Probert, the best way to communicate with these beings. Adamski saw physical meetings. He would go out to the desert and meet these photogenic-looking humanoids who were often very Nordic in appearance. He would share rides in their spacecraft. Folks like Valiant Thor, stuff like that. Valiant Thor, boy. His handler, Frank Strange's, very likely an intelligence asset, but we'll get into that later. Orfeo Angelucci thought the best way to communicate with these entities was through dreamlike, altered states of perception, often involving illness or out-of-body sensations and euphoric states, very akin to shamanic sickness or initiation rites. The tone of the message that each of these guys had. Now, the realist view, quote-unquote, as per Riley Crabb, this was serious and conspiratorial. I just laid it all out for you. Occult warfare is being waged against humanity. Etheric truths are being suppressed. George Adamski had an optimistic and idealist view, something that has very much disappeared from a lot of ufology. We're being told the narrative, it's being shaped often, more often than not, by the quote-unquote government disclosure narrative that's really asserted itself in the last, I don't know, since 2017, since the Tic Tac video. It seems as that's overall the dominant paradigm. But these were, in Adamski's view, these were idealist space brothers who come in peace, and they are warning us about nuclear weapons and materialism. Once again, I will say, almost as if they lived here already and were very much invested in the the path of humanity and what happens to the planet that we have to share with them. Orfeo Angelucci was very much a mystic and a poet of sorts, that he believed that Earth is sick and the higher beings are concerned and individual transformation, one man, woman, and child at a time, is the key. I would agree with this in principle as well. Their views on science and technology laid it all out for Riley Crabb in the quote-unquote realist view. Radionics, etheric physics, suppressed spiritual sciences, such as those of Reich and Tesla, etc. Adamski viewed the spacecraft very much in a nuts and bolts fashion. Gravity controls, scout ships, etc. Orfeo Angelucci, his ships were described in metaphysical and symbolic terms, like glowing spheres of living energy. Views on the government? Riley Crabb, the realist view. Highly critical. Believes there is, once again, a vast conspiracy of occult warfare and suppression by secretive, occult, and scientific elites, secret societies as well. Adamski was fairly respectful or just neutral as far as his views on government. Early Adamski saw limited suppression but also cooperation with the government as the way to go. Orfeo Angelucci was less concerned with government and more focused on personal revelation and inner experience. He was much more in thoughts of evolution, not revolution. Once again, I don't know, the path of the poet and mystic appeals to me a little bit more as far as Angelucci's overview of government, etc. Appeals to me more. I don't know. Sometimes you're a Miranda, and sometimes you're a Carrie. Just got to take the quiz and find out. The threats they identified, well, Riley Crabb, as laid out earlier, demonic, astral trickster forces, parasites, vampires from outer space, or different vibrational frequencies, rather. The spiritual framework of Riley Crabb, deeply rooted in theosophy, the BSRF channelings, and the occult warfare model. Now, Adamski was influenced by Christian imagery, filtered it through various forms of New Age mysticism. Adamski was influenced by theosophy and occultism, but he packaged his spiritual framework as much more Christian-adjacent universalism, very seldom veering into realms of, let's say, I don't know, radical utopian idealism, something that basically gets you branded as a communist in the time that he was operating. Angelucci veered more into a Gnostic, symbolic, and emotionally driven view of spirituality, often drawing on Christian imagery but filtered through a cloud of New Age mysticism. The threats identified by each of these men, well, laid it out for Crabb in the realist view. It's those damn dirty, demonic, astral trickster forces, interdimensional vampires of sorts, Darrows, psychic warfare, misuse of etheric technology, the archontic forces of creation. Adamski viewed the biggest threat as largely human ignorance and warlike behavior, as well as the atomic bomb and the military-industrial complex as sort of the apex predator in this worldview. Angelucci saw the biggest threat to be earthly suffering and fear, especially emotional imbalance and spiritual illness, as he likely would have referred to it. Just the pain and suffering within us all is the biggest threat that we have to deal with. And their end goals, all very different, as laid out in Riley Crabb's quote-unquote realist view. The end goal is to awaken humanity to the etheric truth and reclaim the suppressed spiritual sciences. Adamski's view, or end goal, the end goal in Adamski's view is to join the Space Brotherhood, stop all war, and evolve morally. The moral implications were big to him. Orfeo Angelucci's worldview, the end goal, is to understand the divine spark within each and every one of us and to prepare for cosmic ascension. So, once again, a form of evolution. This is a much more It's not a moral evolution, it's a spiritual, existential evolution. Adamski treats saucers like real machines flown by actual people from other planets, focuses on nuclear disarmament, moral purity, and the welcoming of our quote-unquote cosmic neighbors, the Space Brothers. He believed that the Venusians were watching Earth lovingly and wanted to help us, and publicly met with government officials and even claimed cooperation with some. To what degree exactly? Well, we'll find out in just a second. Angelucci, his experiences were dreamlike, filled with light, sound, and rapture. These were all very much of a religious, visionary, mystical experience that he had every time he encountered UFOs or their occupants. He believed he was, quote-unquote, chosen for transformation. Not that he was a chosen one, but just activated to a degree. That this happened with other people as well. There are no chosen ones, I guess you could say. He was often overwhelmed or ill during his contacts and interactions with UFOs and their occupants. It was like looking on the face of the divine and the flesh being corrupted in its presence because it could not handle it. Contact was intensely personal and emotional, very much like a shamanic illness or spiritual initiation, as far as Angelucci was concerned. Crabb's quote-unquote realist view took a paranoid, some would say pessimistic, but he definitely calls it a realist approach, quote-unquote realist. Psychic contacts are real, but there's a war to suppress the truth. He was deeply skeptical of any surface-level quote-unquote alien narrative, and he believed most of it was disinformation. He sought to synthesize channeling, theosophy, radionics, and geopolitics into a grand, unified occult theory. He emphasized Etherians, not spacefaring aliens, and believed that the multi-layered reality of saucers was not just physical, but something real and beyond real. The ultra-real, the hyper-real. Crabb's vision was arguably the most esoterically complex of these three gentlemen, where Adamski wanted to humanize aliens like they were your buddies and neighbors you just invite over to a barbecue, and Angelucci wanted to spiritualize all reality through these beings and experiences with them. Crabb wanted to expose the occult mechanisms behind modern history and present saucer interactions and contact with these entities who are associated. It's all part of a long suppressed metaphysical war being waged in the background, one that encompassed everything from Tesla technology and radionics to astral parasites and one-world governments. The BSRF served as a hub for fringe scientists and researchers interested in everything from free energy devices to bioplasmic fields. Key roles of radionics, orgone energy, hollow earth beliefs, as well as ideas like color healing, geometric forms, and crystal energies as medical or healing practices and technologies, devices, etc. They're very much central to that belief system. BSRF publications were a mixture of hard-to-follow pseudoscientific theories, spiritualist insights, and practical schematics, often provided with disclaimers that they were for, quote, experimental use only, which, CYA, in case anyone's expecting some major outcomes after putting one of these devices together. Well, once again, not FDA approved and for experimental use only. If anyone wants to look into some of the further beliefs and ideas, concepts associated with the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, probably the best things to check are the Round Robin publications, the zines, as mentioned earlier, the Ethership Mystery and Its Solution by Mead Lane, the Inner Earth and Flying Discs is another publication of theirs. Color, Consciousness, and Subtle Energies. Riley Crabb's The Realist View of Flying Saucers. The Handbook of Psychic Healing Devices. Now, there is limited but very real evidence that the U.S. government was aware of the BSRF's activities, aside from the obvious earlier mentions regarding documents and memorandums specifically sent by Meade Lane himself to government officials. There are declassified FBI files that mention the Foundation in passing in relation to mail monitoring of esoteric publications, as well as their associations with individuals like George Hunt Williamson, who was definitely under FBI surveillance. George Hunt Williamson, of the three Georges, is one of the more eccentric. That's saying something, because these were all Space Brother contactee types. George Hunt Williamson was one of the co-authors of The Saucers Speak, published in 1954. He came under FBI surveillance in the 1950s primarily due to concerns about his international activities, including passport violations and his known associations, rather than solely for his UFO beliefs. In the early 1950s, Williamson traveled extensively throughout Latin America, notably Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil. In the post-World War II era of the 1950s, probably something to keep an eye on. He was reportedly conducting what he described as archaeo-occult research into ancient civilizations and supposed Atlantean remnants, activities that he claimed were tied to extraterrestrial knowledge. He and his wife were investigated by the FBI and the U.S. State Department after allegedly using forged and/or fraudulent documents to travel abroad. Reports indicate he altered passport details or traveled without proper clearance, raising suspicions during the persnickety, we'll say, Cold War climate. The classified FBI files and indirect mentions in the NICAP archives confirmed that these investigations were more bureaucratic than ideological, but his UFO work definitely made him a subject of interest. Williamson was closely associated with George Adamski, who also attracted attention due to his mass following and sometimes politically charged rhetoric. While Adamski generally downplayed his political implications, if any, Williamson's theories often leaned into anti-establishment and anti-authoritarian territory, discussing ancient secret societies, hidden history, and interdimensional communications. The FBI monitored such figures during the Red Scare to assess if their teachings might be used to subvert government authority or incite unrest, even if it was being done inadvertently or unwittingly. Another thing that got the government to clap eyes on Williamson and his colleagues, including one Alfred Bailey, was their claimed use of shortwave or ham radios to quote-unquote channel messages from space beings, including messages from beings calling themselves, quote, the Confederation, unquote. And these were interpreted by some as esoteric messages calling for peace and global transformation, but government officials found it unusual enough to warrant watching. The fact that it was being done over ham radios and shortwave frequencies. I'm sure that if the FCC was around at the time, or its predecessor, probably had them looking into this as well. There's no direct evidence they thought it was Soviet propaganda, but any unconventional use of radio frequencies during this period was very much scrutinized. Also, as far as George Hunt Williamson, out of the three Georges, George King is he lives in the UK. He's part of the group who would become the Aetherius Society, textbook UFO cults. We'll get into that a little down the road as well. Not this episode, but a future episode. I'm gonna just cover a massive array of various UFO cults, other than the ones that are getting a brief once over in this episode. But one of the things that also drew the eyes and ire of the FBI upon George Hunt Williamson was his apocalyptic doomsday speak. In both his books, The Saucers Speak and his other book, Secret Places of the Lion, Williamson hinted at imminent transformation of society, hidden rulers and cosmic hierarchies intervening in human affairs, and this quasi-political mysticism, while mystical on the surface, sometimes bordered on anti-government conspiracy rhetoric. And this was enough to catch the attention of the FBI, especially during a period of heightened sensitivity to cults, dissident movements, and unorthodox ideologies during the Cold War. Williamson's file has not been officially declassified in full. In fact, much of it is still redacted, unavailable. But indirect references to him appear in files connected to George Adamski, the aforementioned Frank Stranges, who was best buds with the alleged Venusian diplomat Valiant Thor, as well as NICAP, or the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, which I believe has been long defunct since 1980, I believe. Yeah, no longer operates. NICAP, in its original form, not around still, although it remains a significant resource for information on the UFO phenomena. NICAP was founded in 1956 by Donald Kehoe and Thomas Townsend Brown, who I believe is another zero-point energy, free energy scientist, enthusiast, etc., to investigate and research reports of unidentified flying objects. The organization collected and analyzed UFO sighting reports, corresponded with the FBI directly, and engaged in public relations efforts to raise awareness about the UFO phenomenon. Precursor to what today is a place occupied by MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. This is the sort of mixed bag of military and government officials with civilians, essentially. NICAP's work contributed to the public discourse surrounding UFOs, providing valuable documentation of the phenomena during its active period. While NICAP ceased operations in 1980, its archives and historical records continue to be consulted by researchers and enthusiasts alike. Yeah, they have a long-lasting legacy that stretches out to this day. Williamson wasn't surveilled solely for believing in aliens. He was surveilled because he was a fringe traveler, a bit of a nut, a bit of a kook, if you will, using questionable documents, operating radios in weird ways that the government didn't like, or at least was very suspicious of, as well as dabbling in conspiratorial metaphysics at a time when anything unusual could be interpreted as subversion or foreign influence. There are also unsubstantiated concerns about quote-unquote subversive metaphysical groups during the Cold War. However, in addition to these notes on George Hunt Williamson's likely FBI surveillance, I would say more than likely FBI surveillance, there's significant evidence, both documented and circumstantial, suggesting that government infiltration of early UFO contactee movements did take place. While fully confirmed infiltrators are rare due to limited declassified materials, there are several strong candidates, suspicious affiliations, and outright FBI intelligence surveillance efforts directed at early contactees, especially in the period between 1947 to 1960. Now, the confirmed or strongly suspected government infiltration or surveillance cases include George Adamski, who was subject to FBI and Air Force surveillance. While not an infiltrator himself, Adamski was heavily surveilled by the FBI and the U.S. Air Force, particularly during the 1950s after he claimed to have met a man from Venus. Well, several people from Venus, essentially. FOIA documents show that FBI agents attended his lectures undercover and took note of potential subversive elements in his writings and rhetoric. He was listed in FBI and Air Force reports, warning that quote-unquote space brother messages could be used to spread anti-American or communist sympathetic messages under the guise of quote-unquote cosmic unity. Oh, that's the cosmic unity. That's the first thing that makes the Cold War era United States government think of is this guy's out to fuck people. The key documents FBI file on George Adamski, as well as multiple mentions of concern over quote unquote internationalist or pacifist messages might be communistic in tone, are referenced in the FBI files on George Adamski. You can find those pretty much anywhere on the internet. George Hunt Williamson has possible agency associations. His real name, by the way, is Michael de Obrenovic. Michael de Obrenovic. Williamson was deeply connected to quasi-occult and fascist-leaning ideologies, as well as a guy we're fixing to talk about here in a minute. Rumors have circulated that he was monitored by the he was monitored by the FBI, and his passport was allegedly revoked in the 1950s after too many quote-unquote foreign UFO investigations. Uncle Sam didn't like his travels and poking his nose into things on an international scale. Rumors have circulated in both ufology and intelligence circles that Williamson may have cooperated with U.S. intelligence at various points, either willingly or under pressure, something of a criminal informant equivalent. He's also connected to multiple figures with known fascist and ultranationalist leanings, who were also targets of federal investigations. There's a fellow by the name of Wayne Sulu Aho, AHO. He's a former Army intelligence officer as well as a space brother contactee. Aho claimed to be in psychic contact with space beings and led contactee conferences into the 1960s. He served in the U.S. Army counterintelligence during World War II and later began promoting ideas similar to space brother advocates, but with a strangely pro-military and anti-communist twist, which is very strange among these people, but he was the one that had it. Someone was going to eventually. Some researchers, such as Greg Bishop or Adam Gorightly, speculate that Aho may have played the role of a quote-unquote limited hangout or disinformation agent designed to lead the more extreme contactee followers to dead ends, paper streets, etc. Then there's a gentleman by the name of Howard Menger, with ties to the Army Psychological Operations. Menger was a popular contactee in the late 1950s who later admitted that some of his quote-unquote Venusian contacts may have been part of psychological testing conducted by the Army. In interviews and later writings, Menger described how some of his alleged space contacts, quote, looked and acted like humans in military gear, unquote. He openly discussed being approached by military personnel who encouraged him to keep promoting his messages, suggesting at least some level of coordination with military psyops. There's another gentleman by the name of Daniel Fry, who, in all likelihood, was also being surveilled, much like Adamski. He claimed he was contacted by an alien named Alan the Alien, near White Sands Missile Range in 1950. You better believe if he was contacted by an alien named Alan near White Sands Missile Range in 1950, somebody was watching him. He worked as an engineer on guided missile and propulsion systems. Yep, he's being watched. Was being watched. His real-life employment made his claims more intriguing to both public and federal authorities. He founded Understanding Incorporated, a quasi-religious UFO education group that expanded nationwide, and later admitted he'd been involved in classified military projects, possibly triggering deeper surveillance. He was suspected by some researchers, namely Jacques Vallée, of being used or monitored by military intelligence to test reactions to contactee-style messages. His story featured advanced technical ideas with parallels to science fiction tropes, leading some researchers to speculate about intelligence curiosity. However, there is no confirmed FBI file or operation known to have surveilled him directly. His activities and claims likely made him of interest. No direct documentation has surfaced, but I'd say, judging solely on his career and background, he was very likely being watched. Another gentleman who was investigated by the FBI, a fellow by the name of Otis T. Carr, Carr with 2 R's, claimed to be a protege of Nikola Tesla and announced plans to build a functional anti-gravity saucer that he dubbed the OTC-X1 in the late 1950s. He promised free energy and spaceflight to the public, but was later arrested and convicted of fraud in 1961. His company, Amalgamated Flying Saucer Clubs of America, attracted media attention and drew government scrutiny. One of many people, I believe, who has actual patents with the patent office for anti-gravity technology. A lot of it's theoretical, but it's there. You can find it. Some researchers believe his work may have skirted too close to suppressed technologies, prompting his federal monitoring. Possible interest from U.S. intelligence in whether Carr had independently stumbled onto certain dangerous ideas or concepts, like whether his claims were being used to discredit similar genuine research, maybe. Sometimes clown ops are applied. You're busy looking at the clown, you're going to miss everything the magician's doing. Carr promoted an anti-gravity OTC-X1 saucer in the mid-1950s and founded OTC Enterprises, and was later convicted of fraud. His high-profile publicity in fringe technology made him a known subject in UFO and fringe technology circles. An FBI file does exist on him, though public access is limited, indicating there is still some official interest. So, for whatever reason, interesting that there's interest in it. Then we have Reverend Frank E. Stranges. He's a possible federal asset or willing ally. He's a Christian evangelist preacher, founder of the National Investigations Committee of Unidentified Flying Objects, or NICUFO, and claimed to have met a Venusian being named Valiant Thor, who allegedly was working with the Pentagon on Earth's behalf. I'm just going to come out and flat out say I think the story of Valiant Thor is utter bullshit on many levels. That's just me. I don't know. I have my reasons. I'm reading some of them to you now. But Reverend Frank Stranges authored a book, Stranger at the Pentagon, which helped blend religious prophecy with UFO lore. This is where a lot of it can be traced back to this. There's a book called Final Events, written by Nick Redfern. I would say it's of the exact same vein of UFO literature, amongst many other works. Demons. It's all demon related. Or so they would have you believe. He was regularly invited to speak before military personnel and government-affiliated UFO groups. Unusually good access to military installations, suggesting either some kind of high-level clearance or a strategic usefulness. His message, though quite fantastical, was strongly pro-military, pro-Christian, and anti-communist, aligning with Cold War propaganda objectives. As a Christian contactee, Stranges frequently spoke at Department of Defense-connected venues and military audiences. He was considered by some to be either a friendly religious collaborator or a deliberate plant used to soften UFO disclosures of spiritual allegory. It's beyond the scope of this particular episode, but there will be a future investigation into the weaponization of Christianity during the Cold War. His FBI files apparently exist, but there's no public release. His ministry turned media career and intelligence connections have led some researchers to suggest either informal alignments or that the military had some interest in either collaborating with or co-opting his message. Finally, we've got a gentleman by the name of Gabriel Green, who's monitored by the FBI as a former Hollywood photographer turned UFO lecturer and political candidate. He actually ran for president of the United States in 1960 on a futurist, quote-unquote, space people platform. A bit of a vermin supreme, if you will. calling for universal disarmament and space contact. He formed the Universal Flying Saucer Party and later the Universal Industrial Federation, promoting both metaphysical and progressive policies. He advocated world government, advanced alien technologies, as well as peaceful space contact, which were all red flags to the Cold War era authorities. FBI surveillance notes suggest that Green was seen as a potential radical influencer with an unusually large public appeal. He was tapped into an emerging New Age series of beliefs, movements, etc., while maintaining the appearance of legitimacy, making him both a risk and a potential propaganda target. So by the late 1960s, Green was largely retreating from public life, though he maintained correspondence with other contactees and fringe political actors. He was monitored by the FBI as a quote-unquote potential subversive because of unconventional political messaging mixed with occult and ufological themes. Public FBI case logs confirm that surveillance interest in contactees like Green did in fact exist. Now, as far as the intelligence agency motives for infiltration of these contactee movements when they were first popping up, there's a psyops and social engineering degree to this. So contactee circles were spreading radical pacifism, anti-nuclear messages. That was a huge one. So of course, that's a red flag as far as Uncle Sam's concerned. Sometimes these groups were also pushing quasi-religious ideologies, making them ideal for both study and disruption or co-opting by Cold War psychological operations divisions, i.e. the CIA's Office of Policy Coordination. It's always the most innocuous sounding groups, isn't it? But there was interest or motivation to corral these folks or co-opt them into psyops and social engineering for purposes of containing leaks. Some contactees described aerial craft and propulsion technologies resembling things seen at classified test ranges, such as the Muroc/Edwards Air Force Base story mentioned earlier with Dr. Light. The government may have used infiltration to redirect attention toward more absurd, non-credible sources, thereby burying any legitimate leaks under layers of disinformation. Groups that promoted quote-unquote universal brotherhood or anti-nationalist ideologies were automatically flagged by the FBI as well as the U.S. Army, specifically counterintelligence units during the height of the Cold War. Several contactees also had ties to neo-fascist or apocalyptic Christian groups, which drew attention from federal surveillance programs. Now, I'm going to go on a limb and say, as far as neo-fascist and or apocalyptic Christian groups, chicken or the egg? These groups could have come about very organically, all on their own, or I think maybe, in some cases, they had a little help. They might not have started as such ideologues of neo-fascism or apocalyptic Christianity, but they could have had a shove in the right direction or been created entirely artificially from whole cloth. Who knows? But while no single figure is definitively outed as a government plant in the early contactee movement, multiple contactees were under active surveillance, as illustrated before, with several individuals. Several had clear links to military intelligence, counterintelligence, or psychological warfare circles. Individuals like Wayne Aho and Howard Menger are especially compelling as potential intelligence-adjacent operatives, whether witting or unwitting, while George Hunt Williamson stands out for his ideological radicalism and shadowy global movements for the sake of archaeo-occult studies and ufological research and investigations that he was very much in the midst of. Now, to give you a prime example of one of the first contactees in America who also had ties to the ugly side of all this kind of stuff. Perhaps of particular interest in this context is a gentleman by the name of William Dudley Pelley and his fascist Silver Legion of America, aka the Silver Shirts, and how his ideologies were subtly echoed through post-war UFO subcultures and esoteric movements, which left a legacy that still shadows a large part of modern ufology. The so-called Vril Society, there was no such thing during World War II or pre-World War II. At least that's the prevailing overall quote-unquote official narrative. This is something that was very much the creation of post-World War II neo-Nazis, the ones who created the myth of Maria Orsic, the ones who created the myth of Maria Orsic, Nazi UFOs, Die Glocke. I mean, some of it's so overlapped with disinformation campaigns by alleged neo-Nazi UFO groups with stuff that may or may not have actually been going on. However, a lot of it has seemingly been debunked. So it just kind of depends on how many layers of reality and denial or affirmation of quote-unquote reality you can 4D chess inside your head to figure out what goes where. William Dudley Pelley was a mystical fascist, was at one time a screenwriter and journalist who experienced a sudden shift in the 1920s after claiming to have had a near-death / out-of-body experience during which he was allegedly shown profound truths about the universe and spiritual reality underlying, well, reality. Following this event, he abandoned Hollywood and founded his spiritualist group he called Soulcraft, and began publishing arcane material that blended Christian mysticism, reincarnation, anti-materialism, and, over time, increasingly large amounts of authoritarian and anti-Semitic ideology. By the 1930s, Pelley had evolved into a self-styled American fascist. He was deeply influenced by Hitler and Mussolini. He founded the Silver Legion of America in 1933, who were often called the Silver Shirts. They were modeled in both form and rhetoric on the German Nazi Party and its paramilitary wing, the Brown Shirts. The Silver Shirts wore silver uniforms and swastika-like thunderbolt insignia. They held public rallies, published incendiary literature, and sought to unite far-right Christian nationalists and racial purity movements under a new theocratic fascist state. You see, this shit's been going on for quite some time. The Silver Shirts are essentially fascism in robes of spiritual destiny, just home-cooked occult Nazis, basically. The Silver Shirts were unique among American fascist groups of the time in that they openly fused esoteric Christianity and metaphysical beliefs with political authoritarianism and racial ideology. Pelley believed in karma, reincarnation, Atlantis, cosmic hierarchies, and a coming spiritual cleansing of the earth. However, he also maintained a virulent, anti-Semitic worldview and claimed that the Jews were agents of quote-unquote materialism and cosmic interference, preventing the spiritual awakening of the Aryan soul. This is where you get the corruption or misinterpretation of theosophical ideas of racial and cosmic. It's occult eugenics once again. Just occult eugenic ideas. The group gained tens of thousands of followers at its peak, which in itself is just sad and awful. Pelley ran for president in 1936 under his Christian Party, but by the early 1940s, the federal government cracked down hard. He was convicted of sedition in 1942 for his subversive pro-Axis propaganda and served several years in prison. His official political influence waned, but his more mystical, occult, and ufological ideas never fully disappeared. After World War II, Pelley receded from public politics and returned to mysticism, but now, with a twist, he began writing about space beings, galactic hierarchies, and spiritual/vibrational evolution. In doing so, he was repackaging many of his older theosophical/fascist beliefs under the emerging guise of UFO contact literature, ascended masters, the quote-unquote Great White Brotherhood, etc. He continued to promote soulcraft from his base in Noblesville, Indiana, which now blended extraterrestrial revelations with his Christo-fascist race-based cosmology, we'll say. More disturbingly, elements of Pelley's esoteric racism quietly filtered into post-war contactee and UFO circles. I mentioned the I am activity earlier. If you played down all of the Nazi elements of the silver shirts and replaced it with in-your-face, overt, New Age Christianity, but essentially keeping all the same beliefs, that's pretty much what the I am movement was. Slightly more socially acceptable, racist, UFO, Christian monstrosity. I don't know. Yeah, it was a Frankenstein's monster of just weirdness, and they were involved in quite a bit of strange pseudo-occult, just wackiness, all their own. There's a YouTube channel, I believe it's called Weird Reads, with the hostess's name escapes me at the moment, but she's got some excellent videos. I'll try and include the link in the show notes to some, but she's got some excellent videos that cover certain periods in the history of the I am activity movement, and boy howdy, it's special. Anywho, so the disturbing elements, Pelley's esoteric racism, like I said, they filtered into post-war contactee and UFO circles. His influence can be seen in the quote-unquote space brother narratives of George Hunt Williamson, as well as Adamski, though not necessarily racist or fascist themselves. They were influenced by Pelley's material and paralleled it with their own talk of Atlantean bloodlines, ancient wisdom, cosmic battles between light and dark, and certain concepts and ideas within what, again, constitutes basically occult eugenics. There's a lingering contamination in both ufology and New Age belief systems. While Pelley himself became obscure after his death in 1965, his ideological legacy persisted in the following ways. Pelley helped shape an early template for theosophically inflected racism, where certain ethnic groups were said to be closer to the divine plan, and often framed in Atlantean or Lemurian mythos. This is often couched in spiritualized racism and ascended masters lore. These ideas reemerged in fringe circles that linked quote-unquote Nordic aliens with Aryan spiritual evolution. It's a meme that still exists today in parts of the so-called quote-unquote Galactic Federation and Starseed communities. If you are a Starseed, I mean, I guess good for you. Just maybe examine further what is being done on Earth with talk surrounding your galactic heritage. I'm just saying, be mindful, be wary. The fusion of anti-Semitism, hidden history, and cosmic warfare became a hallmark of later UFO conspiracy lore. Groups like CASA, the aforementioned Aetherius Society, and even elements of the early BSRF absorbed fragments of Pelley's style of myth-making, albeit often unconsciously or repurposed without attribution. Pelley's work influenced or foreshadowed later fascist mystic movements or esotericists such as Savitri Devi, Miguel Serrano, James Mason, etc., all of whom saw Nazism not just as a political system, but as a spiritual crusade. Some of these figures were, in turn, cited by modern, quote, esoteric Hitlerists or UFO-adjacent white nationalist groups. There's a digital age QAnon-style synthesis, a growing body of online UFO/disclosure content that now blends cosmic awakenings, New Age ascension, anti-globalism, great resets, crypto-fascist archetypes, which in many ways echo Pelley's syncretic conspiratorial worldview, often without users knowing their lineage or the lineage, where these ideas come from. You can even see this in groups such as the Order of Nine Angles, Adam Waffen, the other Waffen, I'm sure, the worst of the worst, essentially. William Dudley Pelley wasn't just a fascist or a mystic, he was a fascist mystic. One of the first in America to weaponize spiritual language in service of authoritarian and racist goals and ideas. And the silver shirts are often treated as a historical curiosity, but their fusion of occultism, fascism, and ufology prefigure modern extremist movements that similarly cloak hate in such flowery, cosmic, and occult language. Today, even as most in the UFO field have disavowed such ideology, there are traces of Pelley's influence which remain buried in certain tropes, figures, and frameworks still found in the margins of ufology, as well as New Age circles, especially the more conspiratorial elements of quote-unquote disclosure culture. Individuals influenced either directly or thematically include George Hunt Williamson, who directly read, corresponded with Pelley, blended Space Brothers, Atlantean Arianism, and Christian mysticism, and spread ideas about a cosmic war between, quote, higher vibrational space beings with dark interdimensional forces, echoing Pelley's moral dualism. There's Raymond Bernard, aka Walter Siegmeister, fringe occultist, hollow earth theorist, and health cultist, promoted ideas of ancient Aryan masters and spiritual elitism that definitely echoed Pelley's mythos, and has used fascist adjacent imagery in esoteric health and UFO circles. There's the aforementioned Savitri Devi, a French Greek mystic and open proponent of quote-unquote esoteric Hitlerism. This is one of the, but simultaneously just outright ridiculous, but also somewhat terrifying forms of occultism or mysticism, if you can even call it that. While not influenced by Pelley directly, she shared his view of Hitler as a cosmic figure and Nazism as a spiritual movement within itself. She helped formalize the framework, later adopted by many neo-Nazi occultists. Right next to her, you have a man named Miguel Serrano, who's a Chilean diplomat for some reason, and a Nazi mystic who advocated that Hitler was in communication with superior extraterrestrial beings from Aldebaran. Why Aldebaran? I don't know. But Aldebaran also figures into all the Vril Society, Maria Orsic, ponytailed psychic women who were channeling UFO blueprints, etc. Allegedly, supposedly. Miguel Serrano is a major figure in codifying UFOs, Aryan gods, and spiritual warfare into an occult fascist doctrine, which is clearly downstream of ideas that Pelley helped popularize. There's groups and movements and tendencies which show up again and again. The aforementioned Aetheria Society, which is a UK and US based UFO cult. They were founded by George King, who is also a contactee, and they framed cosmic masters as saviors of Earth against lower vibrational evil forces. And though outwardly peaceful and more universalist than Pelley, the society reflected many structural elements that Pelley introduced, such as hierarchies, purification missions, spiritual nationalism, and moral esotericism. Once again, the Aetheria Society, I mean, on the surface, they seem all right. I don't know, but there are potentially dangerous ideas. No, there are potentially some bad ideas interlaced in there, things that could be manipulated potentially if people aren't being mindful of what it is they believe and practice. Many contactees from the 1950s and 60s Space Brother era contactees used biblical and racial framing for their alien encounters. There are themes of chosen races and spiritual missions. Atlantis revival is quite common. Pelley's blend of Christianity, reincarnation, and cosmic salvation laid the groundwork for these narratives, whether explicitly or implicitly. There's the Christian identity movement, just a big, nasty swamp full of feces. This group, everything associated with it. It's extreme right-wing theology claiming that white people are the true Israelites, true chosen people of God. They believe in serpent seed bullshit that the Jews and I guess it's just the Jews essentially are the product of Eve, of Adam and Eve fame, getting it on with the snake in the garden, and that I don't even want to say what they think about other people. I'm gonna skip past that part. It's bad. Some early Christian identity thinkers cited or echoed Pelley's soulcraft teachings, but you have this movement to thank for things like Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing, and oh god, just lots of horrible shit that trickles into today. Probably a good deal of mass shootings, just horrible shit. You've got these modern Starseed and Galactic Federation circles, and most of these folks seem fairly harmless, kind of new agey folks. There's mostly online communities that use benevolent alien saviors and reincarnation from alien into human. It's disturbingly close to Scientology lore and theology, which could be problematic for some. I don't know. I mean, talk of cosmic purges of low vibration groups often could be used as potential framing of ideological or I don't know, just enemies, etc. Anything that dehumanizes people. That's why I hate hearing people refer to other people as NPCs, non-player characters. And they're doing it unironically. That's what gets on my nerves. It's the dehumanization of your fellow man. I try to maintain in my head, my heart. I mean, it's not always easy, but I try to maintain that we are all capable of attaining a level of, for lack of a better term, enlightenment, Buddhahood, compassion, and love for our fellow man. And, we just have to work at it. They call it practicing a spirituality or religion for a reason, because, man, it takes a lot of work. You have to put in the work. But, yeah. The Starseed people and Galactic Federation folk, I mean, other than being at times a little goofy, most of them seem pretty okay to me, I guess. I don't know. And then you've got, once again, reaching back to the goddamn Christian identity people, QAnon, sovereign citizen movements, a lot of weird fringes of already insufferable fringe movements like flat earthers, conspirituality. Though not direct descendants, these movements reflect a fusion of esoteric belief with political extremism. Many believers invoke Atlantis or secret bloodlines, spiritual warfare, fallen angels, and just the hidden cabals of dark overlords. I have some Nephilim genes in your pants, in your jeans. The rhetorical lineage, spiritualized fascism, masked in cosmic occultism or metaphysics and ufology. The links are trickling down. The Nordic aliens myth, the tall, blonde, Aryan-like saviors opposing reptilian / demonic gray beings. Just I don't know. As far as Nordic aliens go, I prefer the Jason Reza Giorgiani outlook that these are essentially time traveling Nazis and they're all fucking terrible. I don't know. He sews it up quite well and includes a lot of interesting links to various other phenomena that makes quite a sinister picture of the Nordic aliens. I don't know. I don't trust anyone tall, blonde, and blue-eyed and good-looking. Maybe once. Fool me once, shame on you. The use of Atlantis, Lemuria, or Hyperborea as sort of origin myths for a superior human race, lineage, dynasty, what have you. There's the moral dualism of people who call themselves light workers or the quote-unquote space brothers. And then the framing of corrupting, parasitic, astral vampires, David Icke reptilians, we'll say. I don't know. I kind of have my doubts that David Icke, I think he, I don't know, I'm a Texan, so I guess I'll say bless his heart, but I think he honestly, truly believes that that what he's preaching. I don't know. So I don't think he's got any underlying, he's not using code words. Now, those QAnon motherfuckers, they're all about code words and shit, so who knows? Who knows, you know? But Pelly was closely watched, very closely watched by U.S. intelligence. There are declassified FBI files that confirm that he and his silver shirts were under extensive surveillance from at least the early 1930s and all through World War II. Noted closet transvestite J. Edgar Hoover personally took an interest in the group's fascist leanings and pro-Nazi sympathies. Do you know what J. Edgar's ghost and Clyde Tolson, man, I don't know. If you guys could have just been in the open, maybe he wouldn't have been such a fucking asshole about everything and used other people's sex lives to blackmail them. But I'm getting off topic here. Pelly was indicted and later convicted under the Smith Act in 1942 for sedition and anti-government propaganda during wartime. And that is why he served about 8 years in a federal prison. During World War II, both military intelligence and the OSS, precursor to the CIA, for those who don't know, were involved in monitoring domestic fascist and occult networks, including groups like the Silver Shirts. This group was seen as part of the fifth column threat within the U.S., especially due to pro-German sympathies, paramilitary organizations, and ties to other fascist or racialist figures. I don't know if anyone has seen the picture of the American Nazis under George Lincoln Rockwell, the Nazi meeting that took place at Madison Square Garden. It is frightening, and I don't know. It's very much reminiscent of a future, a potential future I see and fear very much. So I don't know, like that's hopefully just an irrational fear and not as well founded as part of my brain thinks it might be. But there is also the potentiality that while Pelly was very likely not a government agent, there is the possibility or potentiality that his group may have been co-opted or hijacked, most likely infiltrated to some degree. The Silver Legion structure and the fascist aspirations made it a prime target for FBI infiltration, in fact. And like later groups such as the Minutemen or the Aryan Nations, there are it's crawling with feds, I'm sure. The FBI and other agencies often place informants in these radical right wing and occult nationalist groups, especially those that flirt with Nazism, uh, UFO doomsday cults, apocalypticism, or militia, and way too into the Second Amendment heavy activity. Hey, man, I'm all for amendments. Just, I don't know. Gotta draw the line somewhere. Just chill out. Everyone needs to relax. Drink some Shimmerwood beverages. His ideas were tracked and possibly mimicked in later psychological warfare research. In fact, Pelly's writings in the 30s and 40s, their blend of fascism, mysticism, Christianity, race science, aka occult eugenics, and especially apocalyptic prophecy, mirror themes that later pop up in Cold War era PSYOPs programs, early mind control and mass persuasion studies like Lookout Mountain, MK Ultra, the underground boogeyman stories of the alleged Project Monarch, which does not exist, but there's people who are very much convinced of its reality to a dangerous degree. Some researchers suggest that Pelly's Soulcraft and Great White Lodge beliefs, kind of Nazi theosophy hybrid movement, resembled Nazi occult philosophies, and thus they became relevant in post-war studies of authoritarian ideologies, especially in Project Paperclip era strategic psychological profiling. Pelly's later involvement in New Age publishing and promotion of quote-unquote space brother materials in the 50s, similar to early contactees like Adamski, it overlaps with areas monitored by the CIA and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, I believe, OSI. It's possible, though undocumented, that elements of his audience or network were watched under Cold War counterintelligence, especially as these space cults and psychic movements and New Age neo-fascist groups began to intertwine and fester in the coming LSD onslaught of the CIA and projects like Chaos and the potential social engineering of, well, let's just say the hippie movement, for lack of a better term. That's a nice blanket subject statement. But his ideological territory, fascist, occult, nationalist, mysticism, etc., was later of interest to psychological warfare and intelligence studies, especially in a Cold War context where cults and mass mind control, as well as fringe belief systems, were seen as not just threats, but potential tools. There's a lot of chatter about the potential creation, experimentation with new agey occult groups and belief systems, like Jonestown may have been a whole trial run of some sort, co-opting, a hijacking. We know for a fact now that Charles Manson and Project Chaos, I mean, these things happened. So, matter of fact, in keeping with the overall connections to ufology and sort of new age space brother type beliefs, if you read the Stargate Conspiracy, the 1999 book by Lynn Pickett and Clive Prince, presents a compelling, controversial argument that many modern UFO, ancient astronaut, and New Age narratives are deeply entangled with elitist, racist, authoritarian ideologies, whether consciously or unconsciously, wittingly or unwittingly. The authors argue that much of modern ufology, especially the version that emerged after World War II, is not just about aliens. It's really a repackaging of older religious, imperialist, esoteric worldviews. There's inclusion of certain narratives that promote ideas of spiritual or cosmic elites and their bloodlines, that certain humans are quote-unquote chosen or more evolved. There's often containing racial or cultural hierarchies, i.e. ancient wisdom from Egypt or Atlantis passed only to select Western initiates, Anglophile Freemasonic links, The book basically contends that some of these ideas were intentionally engineered or promoted by intelligence agencies, elite think tanks, or occult influenced insiders for ideological or political reasons. If you look at the 20th century alone, just the history and creation and infiltration and co opting and hijacking of various far right groups, leftist groups. I mean, just the special interest groups. I don't know, public action committees. Just once again, various groups with various extremely innocuous sounding names. Project for a New American Century. Hey, that sounds neat. It's awful. The John Birch Society. That sounds nice and American. Holy shit, you're a bunch of psychopaths. Yeah. So this is a trend that continues on and on again throughout the 20th century. The ancient astronaut narrative is sort of neo-colonial. The theory that ancient civilizations only achieved greatness or were able to do things like the pyramids, mathematics, writing, etc., through outside intervention, whether by aliens or Atlanteans, often undermines the intelligence or capability of whichever culture is certainly or is specifically in the spotlight. I think it's not so much that, it's the reverse inside of that, in that, oh, but we can decode the mystery because we are smart. I do believe that there was highly advanced civilizations, peoples, methods, and methodologies that were lost to history or hidden by certain people, and being hidden. Smithsonian, I'm looking at you. Zahid Hawass, why are you a fucking weirdo about Egypt? I would think that you, of all people, would want to look deeper into many of the mysteries surrounding ancient civilization, but I don't know. I guess not. There's some reason to keep a lot of this shit secret from the masses in general for some reason. I just don't, I don't know. Or at least control the narrative. So many early contactees like Adamski or Pelly claim to have received private knowledge from their space brothers or quote-unquote ascended masters. It's often couched in theosophical ideology. And once again, it's these Nordics and ascended masters, this quote-unquote great white brotherhood. They speak of uplifting humanity, but warn of the dangers of racial mixing or moral decay. There's also the potential for CIA and intelligence manipulation, disinformation campaigns using UFO beliefs and groups, CIA, NSA, DIA, AFOSI, PSYOPs encouraging, or it suggests that some UFO cults and quote-unquote channeled entities may have been used to perhaps disempower or agitate political dissenters, or ultimately encourage submission to a higher authority, quote unquote. Groups like the Nine and the intelligence and American aristocracy connections just interlinking throughout the whole thing. Very highly suspicious and strange that these are the people chosen to be spoken to by the alien overlords, etc., the ultra-terrestrial overlords. There's talk of returning god kings and all this new age UFO literature that talks about the star gods / aliens, the ancient astronauts will return to guide humanity or restore the lost wisdom. The authors of the Stargate conspiracy argue there are subtle conditions that people will have to accept authoritarian rule as long as it's framed as a benevolent, from above power source or authority, as long as it's from aliens or secret elites or ancient Egyptian gods. I don't know, just bowing to it. It's replacing one master for another. What I alluded to earlier, a bit of a contention between the beliefs inherent in a Judeo-Christian civilization and the supplanting of much of that myth and religious belief with ancient astronauts and star gods, etc., and that and that I don't know, ideas that are essentially the foundational cornerstones of ancient alien theories are essentially a form of bulwark or co-option of Christianity's religious authority and various other religious authorities. Reframing of mythologies and spiritualities that have been around for millennia. Just I don't know. It's a strange power structure and or power structures and the conflict thereof, the tete-a-tete, the dance between them, if you will, from an ideological standpoint, and who ends up where, I don't know. I'm not like throwing down a gauntlet or picking sides here or anything. I just find the ideological dance very intriguing as far as looking at history as a chessboard or a dance floor, and I don't know. Someone better bring their best moves. Start popping and locking. Andrea Puharich, man, I've covered before. Someone I'll probably recover because I barely touched the surface with this guy. But him and the nine, the alleged Egyptian gods slash aliens that he and his buddies channeled up. This is deeply influential in the New Age circles, and it's reverberated throughout culture. Stargate conspiracy connects him to various intelligence circles and suggests that the Nine were part of a possible psychological warfare operation. Peter Tompkins, Gene Roddenberry, the Assailant Institute, these are all adjacent networks implicated in promoting the narratives shaped by such ideas. Remote viewing, the pretty much the entirety of America's psychic soldiers, etc., have strong connections to the Nine. The Stargate Project and remote viewing have strong connections to Scientology. And while not racist per se, Picknett and Prince, the authors of the Stargate conspiracy, see projects like the remote viewing Sci-Spy program, Spycologists, Sci-Spycologists, as part of a broader attempt to control or weaponize altered states, fringe beliefs, and parapsychology for state purposes. And I'm delving more and more into this and plan on, I mean, we hear so much about the American side of this, the side of, you know, the Monroe Institute, the Gateway process. We hear so much about our side. So that's why for the last month or two now, I've been diving deeper and deeper into the Soviet, Russian, and Chinese Communist Party research into parapsychology on their end of things and how all of that has echoed into today. And that's the big research project, surprise, that I'm working towards. And man, I'm finding more and more interesting and potentially terrifying things every day. No, it's not terrifying. It's just it's interesting to watch we see how the Stargate project and the Gateway process, the Stargate project, and remote viewing and SRI and parapsychology in the United States. Like, we've seen how all this has affected our culture firsthand. So it's interesting to get on the other side of this and see where it's flourished from the Soviet perspective of being an atheist, materialist, mechanical state, as well as the same for China, but having centuries upon centuries of complex and intricate spiritual systems, religions, just the cultural mythology, etc., associated with these cultures, and it's complex and crazy and interesting as hell. And I don't know. I look forward to sharing a lot of what I found with you folks. I don't know. It's weird that most of the, I mean, we see today how these spiritual and religious beliefs are so prominently interlaced with essentially all the New Age beliefs and psychical research, etc. Parapsychology is where it stands today in our culture, and what people believe, like the ghost bro status of knowledge of the paranormal and or quote unquote human potential movement, we'll say. It's just, I don't know, it's very lacking, and unfortunately, our culture, it's still very materialist and hung up on a lot of horse shit, essentially. But I'm rather glad to say, in summation, that the BSRF was never formally investigated or targeted for any such nonsense. They have never verged into the realms of the sadder, darker parts of New Age belief and ufology, etc. Maybe misguided here and there, but who isn't every so often, you know? And though marginal even into ufology and ufology culture, the Borderland Science Research Foundation's ideas strongly prefigure the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, the notion that UFOs are not simply aliens in solid metal ships, but beings, entities, energies, intelligences from possible parallel realities interacting through consciousness and vibration. And these are ideas that are very, very prescient from their time and place. From 1945, pre-Roswell, pre-Kenneth Arnold flying saucer sightings, to today's, you know, we jump into the New Age and the 60s counterculture, and people like John Keel and Jacques Vallée and Terence McKenna, and all these ideas of other dimensions and consciousness studies, quantum mechanics, AI, transhumanism, you know, all this stuff that's so prevalent and interlaced throughout much of today's culture. It's strange to see the journey and the influence that a lot of this stuff has played. But today, the BSRF is technically active, maintaining a small online presence and selling out their digital archives. Its influence lingers in fringe communities where channeling, metaphysics, techno-Gnosticism, and parapsychology continue to converge today. It does not function at a large federally funded institutional level, and does not seem to be filing any detailed 990 tax forms publicly. Its legacy lives on chiefly through the physical publications and emails you can order directly from their catalog service. The BSRF's website is active online at borderlandsciences.org. Sees very low traffic, typically fewer than 200 visitors a day, mostly within the U.S., which is a shame. Once again, like I said, there's a vast treasure trove of weird, just utterly alien high strangeness that really should be viewed and learned and appreciated. But the domain remains registered and gradually maintained. So if you are planning to contact the BSRF for any research materials, ordering from their print catalog and email inquiries are still the best way to engage. Seek out the round robins, seek out the books. Speaking of books, I'm going to run through all my sources here. I've got quite a bit. See, the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation publications include BSRF round robin journals from 1945 to 1950, especially volume 1 through 5. The Ether Ship Mystery and Its Solution, The Coming of the Guardians, both written by Meade Lane. There's FBI files on BSRF and associated individuals. the William Dudley Pelley files, the FBI vault, George Hunt Williamson's file is FBI FOIA release. Riley Crabb and the Borderland Sciences mentioned tangentially in some FBI and Saucer Watch documents. No public FBI files specifically on Meade Lane, but his associates and contemporaries such as Pelley, Probert, Williamson were surveilled. Messengers of Deception, 1979 by Jacques Vallée. The Supernatural by Whitley Strieber and Jeffrey Capel, 2016. Dark Star Rising by Gary Lockman, 2018. Fringeology by Steve Volk, 2011. Watch the Skies, a chronicle of the flying saucer myth by Curtis Peebles, 1995. Online archival and research resources for the BSRF is the official archive through borderlandsciences.org. It's got digitized newsletters, timelines, Mark Probert's mediumship info, and translogs. Sacredtext.com. It's a collection of Meade Lane and Theosophy adjacent documents. The always, man, if you don't know about the website I'm about to name, shame on you. Go to it as soon as possible and just dedicate a day to just look around on Bibliotheca Pleiades. One of the most formative and best, all-time greatest UFO sources online, Bibliotheca Pleiades. There's the CI Crest archives, the FOIA reading room. You can just search terms for etheric hypothesis, Borderland Sciences, Meade Lane. Who else? I think that's everything off the top of my head. This is Borderland Sciences Research Foundation episode. These guys were way ahead of their time, and just like I said, they essentially, I don't know, built the foundation upon which almost every other alternative UFO, UAP, Fortean phenomena model is built upon and, well, modeled upon. So these guys were super important, massive influence upon culture in general, especially as far as the intersection of esotericism, occultism, and ufology goes. So yeah, check out their work, look into it as deeply as you can, as much time as you can spend, because you will walk away enriched for having done it. And I promise you on that. That's going to do it for this episode. I appreciate you guys listening. I love the hell out of you guys. You're a great audience. Thanks for coming in and hanging out with me for an hour or two every week. I thank you very much for all your clicks and thumbs ups, and comments and likes, and just being there and being a subscriber. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Love you guys. I'm Mike. This is Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclasts, and we will see you on the next one. Peace.